Today, I will be sharing with you an experience I had a few years ago and how I used the LAX airport to get me back to the harbor safely. Welcome to At the Helm. Before I begin to share my experience with you, I'd like to ask a question. How important do you think it is to maintain an observation of our environment in anything that we do really? Hopefully, by the end of this story, you will understand why I think that maintaining a constant observation of the environment is considered safety. So a few years ago, I worked at a boat rental company here in Los Angeles, in the city of Marina del Rey, and 95% of the people we had that rented boats were tourists. It's located near LAX. People fly from all over the world to see the California coastline, and they want to go out and experience it. So anyway, we had this three-person group, two guys and a girl, and they rented two jet skis. On one jet ski there was the guy and the girl, and the third wheel, he went on the jet ski by himself. So they had a time frame, I believe, was an hour and a half. And so we gave them their safety briefing and explained to them the use of the personal watercraft and gave them a general layout of the coastline, where to go and how to come back. We sent them on their way. At the time, I think I was doing engine maintenance on a few of the boats, so that's what I continued doing. One of the things that I always did when I sent people out was I would always note the time. And I'd say, hey, okay, in an hour and a half time, they should be back at this point. So an hour and a half goes by, and I go out to the front of the dock, and the way it's set up, you're standing on the edge of the dock, and you can look straight down to the left of the harbor, and you can see the people that are coming back once they make the turn around the bend. I see the guy and the girl, and I was like, okay, cool, maybe the other guys, I'm just hanging around, slowly coming in behind them. So they get back to the dock, and I go, so where's your friend? They were like, oh, when we left, we went right and he went left. I was like, okay, why would you guys split up? You've never been out here before. This is your first time operating a jet ski. Why would you split up in the group? They were like, well, we didn't really think about that. I was like, okay, it's fine. Now, mind you, we had GPS tracking devices on these boats and watercraft that we rented. So I simply went to Google Maps and did the login, pulled it up, and I noticed that he was just a little bit north of the harbor. So I think to myself, all right, cool, he's on his way and he'll be back. So I get on doing what I was doing, and I said, I'll just let someone else receive him when he comes. So that was about half an hour before sunset. We get a phone call from the fuel dock in Redondo Beach. And the guy goes, hey, there's a guy here in Redondo on one of you guys' jet skis, and he's been here for about 45 minutes, but I think he's having some engine problems. He goes, oh yeah, he's on a jet ski number 2. And then immediately I realized that this guy, even though he was right near the harbor, he went past the harbor like 10 miles. Didn't even realize that that's where he was supposed to come back in. So at this point, we figure like, okay, we got a half an hour of sunlight left. We have to go get this guy. So I load up one of the 17-foot Boston whalers that we had, and I took some tow rope I took some extra clothes just in case he was cold and wet, even though he had a wetsuit on. I had no GPS on the boat. Cell phone was on 14%, go figure, and there was no compass. So I get out the harbor and I just drop the throttle and I'm just flying going to where I need to get to, because I know I only have about a half an hour of sunlight left. And there's a anchorage in Marina del Rey that a lot of ships anchor on sometimes, and they wait it out right there. I think they transfer bulk fuel or something. And so I said to myself, now if I have to come back in the dark, I got to give myself some room away from the land so that I don't run into any of these cables that extend down from the ship that holds them on the mooring. So I get about halfway to Redondo and I stopped to check my phone to look at the GPS. And I felt this splash at the back of my heel. I looked behind me and the boat was taking on water. I just thought to myself, where the hell is this water coming from? So before I even allow any more water to come on, I just get underway again for a little bit, allow all the water to drain out of the boat in the back, and I put it back in neutral, ran back to the back of the boat. And in some Boston whalers, there's a little bilge hole, and their plug to plug the hull is right in that hole. And I was pushing that boat so hard that I popped that plug out of the hole. So I put it back in, wedged it down real tight, and at this point I had about maybe 4% left on my phone. I was like, damn, I gotta do something. So growing up in the Bahamas, we use a lot of reference points, especially the land. Everything that's stands out, whether it's a tower, it could be a particular tree, it could be a particular building. Doesn't matter what it is. We use reference points to figure out where we are. And I'm looking at the land for some kind of telecommunications tower or smokestack or something, and I see this distinct tower in the distance that was taller than everything else, and it had this different hue of a red light. So I'm looking at the map on my phone and I'm looking at the light, and I lined my bow up with that, and I was like, okay, I'll just keep my bow and that should get me to Redondo based on the map. So I keep running, I get to Redondo's harbor, and these guys were doing a sunset paddle in this huge group of people. So I had to really come to like a crawl getting in there, and I lost complete sunlight. As I make the turn into the basin at Redondo, I immediately see the guy sitting there. So I hurry up, go up to him, and I go, hey man, are you okay? And he goes, yeah, I'm fine. I said, do you have any more fuel left in that thing? He goes, no, I used it all trying to get this kelp from underneath the equipment that I sucked up. And I looked down. I was like, this guy sucked up a whole reef of kelp. The entire ski was just a big old patty of kelp all around it. I'm like, oh God. I was like, okay, anyway, hop on my boat, but I'm gonna have to tow the ski back, and it's gonna take us a while. Are you cold? He goes, no. I said, okay, fine. So I already started making the game plan in my head as to how long is this gonna take me and how fast can I really go? Can I cut this time down? The rope that I had with me was maybe 50 feet. I figured it's good enough. Clipped it onto the front, tied it off to the cleat, the stern of the boat, and we leave the harbor, weave our way through all those paddlers. And because I wanted to clear that anchorage with those ships, I went out maybe about 5 miles from the shoreline, and I picked another reference point on the mountain up ahead of me as to holding a straight line as straight as I can get it. So I'm speaking to this guy, and he's starting to shiver a lot. And I offer him a coat, he puts that on. And I basically just use the time to see his life story and, how did he get to visit LA and all of that stuff, just to keep his mind busy and off of the cold. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, how am I going to find Habor again? So about a third of the way through, I remembered that every day as I'm standing on the dock, the planes from LAX would take off on that flight pattern just right over the Habor. It's like, the planes. So I'm looking and I'm starting to find the flight pattern, and it wasn't even busy that night. Usually LAX is crazy, especially in the daytime, the planes just taking off constantly. And for whatever reason that night, hardly any took off. I could see them on the flight pattern circling over the mountain range to land, but I didn't see anything taking off. So I just kept watching the pattern. I get maybe about 3 miles away from the Habor, and all of a sudden this plane takes off. And I just watched it climb. And I started to grin. And just as it took off, I took note on the line as to where that was. And I kept going towards the north. And I was like, okay, when I'm at a particular point where I can see planes flying directly over the boat, I'm gonna make that turn in. And sure enough, there was just a streak of planes taking off and taking off. And I got to that point where they did start to fly right over the boat. I turned in, and I ended up right at the entrance of the Habor. And that guy was so excited. So we got back, and they thanked me and all of that, and that was that. So that for me was my observation paying me back. All those days, those planes take off, and I would always observe them and look at them in awe of these big machines just flying through the air. But you have to be grateful. You just never know where the information is going to come from that you may need to help you to get back to port safely. Those rental boats, they're bare minimum. You don't want to have a bunch of equipment, expensive equipment on there. Most people don't know how to use it. So I had to use my Google Maps on my cell phone because there's no GPS unit. That night I also had a VHF radio. The problem was that the minute I left the Habor, I was no more in range to receive or send out anything because it was a handheld. But yeah, it's extremely important to pay attention to the environment around you. As simple as entering and leaving the Habor. Those buoys that mark the channel, those things shift all the time, especially if it's a inlet that has a lot of strong surges and things like that. Those buoys get knocked off station, and if you're not paying attention, you could be leaving the Habor and just go a little bit too far to the starboard side or come in a little too close on the port and run aground. And it's silly, but it happens. So always be mindful and understand that things change, and if you're observing constantly, you're going to be seeing the same thing over and over. But because of that attention to detail, when something changes, it stands out because it's out of the norm. And that's some advice that I would definitely share, which is why I'm doing it with you. So just always be vigilant. But anyway, thanks for watching At the Helm. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be telling more of my experiences in the future. And also we'll be getting into fuel systems next. How to understand your fuel system. So look out for the next video.